that mark, you could do that. And get you a pretty reasonable measurement. But I would be surprised if her house is as far out of whack as she thinks it is.
I wouldn't. I've worked on some junky old houses, believe me. Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, a weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. I'm Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Builder Ian Schwant.
Hello, everybody.
My Editorial Director, Andrew Zellner.
Good morning.
And our producer, Jeff Rose.
Hi there.
Please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Well, gentlemen, it is good to see you. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Patrick.
Happy to be here.
How's everyone doing?
Doing well. It hit above freezing in Minneapolis yesterday, so like my driveway is no longer very slick, which is fantastic.
Ian told me earlier that your temperature was what, 0?
Yeah, we had 0, and we were getting hit with 20-mile-an-hour sustained winds out here on the Wisconsin prairie, I guess you could call it.
How about you, Andrew? What's your temperature this morning?
I actually don't know.
You quit worrying about it, right? Because
it's
cold.
As soon as it goes above 0, it's just like, we're having a heat wave. So,
Jeff, I was in single digits this morning. How about you?
Yeah, I was probably right around there, 10, somewhere in there.
I think it was 5 here. Yeah, so fun times. I'm glad we're indoors.
Absolutely.
Ian was telling me that his coworkers are trying to build a deck, which sounds just tragic, really.
Yeah, they're out there doing a deck, and I think there's some soffit fascia work involved in that job, and we're finishing up on a 2-story addition on a house right now, so we've got them outside this week yet.
We were talking that it really slows you down to work in temperatures like this. Stuff doesn't work, and you don't work. It's just really hard. I have great sympathy for folks who are trying to make a living in temperatures like that.
Yeah.
So projects, Andrew, you got anything going on? You got your basement finished?
Surprisingly, the basement's not finished yet. So the one of the big things that was holding me up was, where I'm insulating the rim joist with rigid foam, and then like going around the outside of my piece of rigid foam with expanding foam, and I've got I sprung for the like professional foam gun and like the big cans, but I couldn't find the foam cleaner, like in any of the big box stores in my area, and I just so happened to be at Menards, and they just so happen to have like 2 cans on the shelf. So I'm ready to do more spray foam.
In a pinch, you can always just use acetone. That's more or less what that cleaner is. I've done that before.
Yeah, that's good to know.
Is this your first professional style foam gun, Andrew?
It is. I've always just used sort of like half cans. For the most part, because I feel like I can never get them completely empty, and I always either have too much for 1 can or like not enough for 1 can.
I think you'll find the foam gun is pretty good. One thing that's great in the situation you find yourself in is that you can tilt it somewhat sideways and still get foam out of it, unlike the cans where you really have to keep them completely upright.
Yeah. I'm like, now that I got my cleaner, like I'm excited. Before that, I was sort of like, do I just have to do it all in like a day? And that seems overwhelming, but yeah.
If you leave a can of stuff on the gun, it should be okay for, weeks anyway. You should squirt some out of it periodically to make sure it doesn't harden in the nozzle, but yeah. But I say that and I ruin them before I use them ever again.
Yeah.
How about you, Jeff? You working on anything?
No, other than trying to get my snow thrower to work, but
you and small engines. What's the issue with this?
I because we had snow last week, I thought, well, actually last spring, it's like, I'm going to be smart this year and do all the maintenance when it's warm out. So I ordered the parts and went to do it one day and was missing parts. I was supposed to have 2 belts for the auger, and they only sent me 1. So put that all away, ordered the extra belt, and it sat there all summer long. And so Thursday I had to replace the belts, and everything was fine. And Friday, when the snow came, I went out there and ran for 5 minutes, and then it just died and would not start.
That's really hard to diagnose because it was working fine. What happened?
Yeah. I wound up replacing the carburetor and the whole fuel system, and now it works. So,
Wow. Well, I guess that's a best possible outcome. Did you get enough snow moved to make your life easier, or did it stop like right in the middle of the driveway?
no, I'd barely gotten out of the garage before it stopped. So,
Of course. How's your place, Ian? Are you taking a break, now that it's reasonably livable?
Yeah, I took a break, but it was against my will. I had a 3-week bout with COVID over Christmas and New Year's, so I wasn't up for anything, and I had all this stuff planned because I had some time off of work, and it turned into just sitting and watching a lot of YouTube until I felt better. So,
Well, I've heard that if you're vaxxed, the symptoms are not so bad, but that's not true, huh?
I had an autoimmune response to it, which caused me to get this thing called oral mucositis, which is a typical side effect from chemotherapy. So I basically spent the better part of a week not being able to eat or speak. So I was really glad you didn't call me for a podcast during that week.
That's awful.
Oh,
Wow.
man.
Yeah, no, I'm out of it now, but now I'm looking at I'd wanted to start insulating and drywalling the garage, which is, now barely getting above 10 degrees every day. So it's kind of missed a good opportunity to do that, but I'll have to get the propane heater that we use to heat the house out there and heat the garage up and finish up my drywall job. That'll be probably next on my list. But actually, during dinner last night, Sarah and I were spitballing ideas for our first remodeling job of adding windows to the south side of the house. So we had some great
Did
sun
she throw
coming
food
in.
at you, or this was like a mutually
This is
mutual idea?
mutually assured
Yeah.
destruction here.
Okay.
Yeah, no, there was just great sun coming in, and I was like, man, we should have put another window in. And she was like, we should have put more windows in the peak. Would have been really cool. It's like, well, we could still do that. Yeah.
What windows do you have in your place?
We did Marvin Essentials, the fiberglass Marvins, and been really happy with them.
And they're pretty affordable, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think as far as an affordable, high quality window that you can still get some cool options on, I think it's one of the better ones out there.
Good to know.
Yeah. And the air seal great with the fiberglass, and I used mostly fixed and casement windows. So
And they
that
come
really helped.
like pre-finished, right? No painting.
Yeah, they're all fiberglass. So we got
Yeah.
black ones, and they were done right out of the truck when they showed up.
Gosh, that's so great, right? That is such a time saver. Yeah. Oh boy, so we heard more about our discussion with regard to attic chimney chases and manufactured chimneys. Boy, since being over trucked, this has generated more feedback than any other discussion. So this comes from our friend Doug Horgan at BOA. I wanted to weigh in on the discussion of building chases for manufactured metal chimneys and attic spaces from episode 420. First, Patrick's comment that there are thousands of these without problems is great evidence, which we all use every day to understand whether something will work in our climate or not. There are a ton of things we aren't supposed to do that actually work fine, at least around here. And we've seen work fine 1,000 times. That's engineering, the practical application of scientific principles confirmed by experience or not. I think there was a common misunderstanding about running around the crew during the comments that heat and cold meeting cause condensation. Condensation doesn't come from warmth hitting something cold. It comes from moist air hitting something cold. To be fair, these often go together. Warm indoor air in winter normally has more moisture in it than cold outdoor air, for example. And in summer, the warm outside air often has a lot of humidity in it. But if you heat up cold outdoor air, it doesn't become more humid. And when that heated outdoor air has hit something at the cold hit something at the cold outdoor temperature, you don't get condensation because it doesn't have any more moisture in it than the air already had. You've just made warm, dry air. It doesn't have any added moisture ready to drop out on a cold surface. I find dew point temperature or grains per pound ways of looking at moisture content of air to be more helpful in understanding things. This email could turn into a 20-pager if I keep going, though. Great job on the podcast. It's great. So one of the YouTube commenters on this subject made the observation that an uninsulated flue might contribute to ice dams in a snowy climate, and I think he's right. I asked Doug what he thought. He says that's true-ish. Adding heat to an attic can contribute to ice damming, though so can sun shining on your roof, so it's a little hard to say it's going to be the one thing that matters. Your other point in the show is that you don't mess around with a UL rating or other rating agencies like Intertech and Warnock, who seem to do more fireplaces and flues than UL, is also a good point I would emphasize. I forget where I read all this stuff, but manufactured fireplaces, flues, and their ratings are pretty interesting and not something you'd ever want to screw around with. Also, I read somewhere that the outside of even code-built fireplaces and chimneys get really hot if you keep a fire going for a few days, so you aren't supposed to put insulation next to them either. The 2-inch code-required space around them is to cool the outside somehow. One of the key quality points I like to look for at fireplace installs, I have seen some disasters. One of the key quality points I like to look at are fireplace installs. I've seen some disasters in the making, from simple omissions or misunderstandings to trying to cram something into a remodel that wouldn't fit. The group of rating companies, including FM and TICO, would be an interesting subject for an article, and you could finally get to York, PA to the test facility. And I hate to be this guy, but I don't think it's UNL, just UL. I'm ready to be corrected. Of course he's right. No, that was my mistake. Wow, what do you guys think? Do you have one of these metal bestis things in your new house, Ian?
I do not. No,
Yeah.
and I made one note to this email, and it was whom I'd argue with Doug Horgan.
All of us would be best to
Yeah,
not
no,
argue.
I have a lot of respect for Doug. I've attended some of his talks at JLC Live. I think he's probably one of the most brilliant, educated guys in our industry.
Yeah, we're lucky that he listens to the show and keeps us all on the straight and narrow. Thanks,
I'm not
Doug.
sure what he's getting out of us, but
A good laugh.
probably.
Do you have a fireplace in your house, Andrew?
I don't, but I do have a bunch of folks in my neighborhood that like routinely, remove the snow from their roof like the same day it falls, and like
Have you asked them why they do this?
So the house across the street from us actually like went through a year-long remodel where like they redid the first floor and new siding and insulation, and the guy is still out there after every snow removing the snow from his roof. And I think it might be that he's retired and like it's just something he's gotten in the habit of doing. But I've never removed the snow from my roof, and I think the observation that, warming up cold air doesn't add more moisture to it is a way I've never really thought about it before. Mm-hmm. But it also, I don't think it has much to do with people removing snow from their roofs. There is ice damming problems in my neighborhood, especially because it was, built at the turn of the last century, and
Yep.
Insulation is lacking in a lot of places.
Yeah, and I think one of the things folks on YouTube were missing is that air leaks are really what contributes to moisture in your attic more than anything. Yeah. And some folks brought that up, but some folks were still not clear. And it's a confusing subject, I'm first to admit. We also heard from Sam on this. Hey guys, condensation won't be an issue from any heat rating off chimney pipe in a ventilated attic, so long as the conditioned space below is decently sealed. It's the same volume of moisture in the air regardless of temperature. The colder the air, the less water it can hold and more it will reject the vapor onto surfaces as condensation. If anything, the inconsequential heat from the chimney will help protect the roof decking by encouraging ventilation. Don't waste your insulation money chasing the chimney. All right, there we go.
I think he's got two really important points: ventilated attic and decently sealed.
Yeah.
Those should almost be like underlined and in bold.
Yeah, that's the keys to the kingdom, right?
As you just said, a lot of houses don't have those two things.
Yeah.
Or don't have them properly.
This is from Rick regarding our conversation about 15 versus 20 amp receptacles and circuits. I enjoy your show quite a bit and think you perform a tremendous service to all the skilled trades. Thank you. I have to disagree with Mark's comments on episode 418 regarding the use of 20 amp branch circuits in a typical house, and especially one where the homeowner is trying to future-proof their new home. Mark made the comment that most new electrical equipment that people are installing require less power than previous generations, and in his opinion, 15 amp branch circuits will be sufficient in most locations when they're not specifically required by the national, when 20 amp circuits are not required by the National Electric Code. I would agree with him that lighting circuits, especially LED fixtures, draw less amps with the same or increased lumens compared to incandescent or fluorescent fixtures. 15 amp circuits should be adequate for most lighting purposes. However, I am seeing homeowners buy more and more gadgets, computer equipment, and larger TVs. Most homes that are being built today should last over 50 years with adequate upkeep. I can't imagine the next generation of homeowners scaling back on the stuff they plug into their outlets. I understand that most electricians have to bid competitively to stay in business, which may force many of them to go as cheap as possible. 15 amp branch circuits for general use outlets is probably very typical, but it really makes you wonder how long they will be adequate. I usually speak to homeowners before I begin their project and give them the choice of spending the additional money on 20 amp circuits or do bare minimum with 15 amp. I've never encountered any yet that opted for scrimping on the electrical once they think about it. Why spend hundreds of thousands of dollars building your home and then take a chance of being outdated, inadequate in 10 years? And if it is my home, a relative, or anyone I consider a friend, I default to 20 amp outlets. Finally, whether the individual wires are connected together and pigtailed to the outlet, or the outlet itself is used as a connection point for additional outlets, really is left up to the installer's preference. Both methods have their pros and cons. The only wiring method that I would strongly caution against is shoving the individual wires directly into the spring-loaded connections on the outlets, described as backstabbing, without the ability to tighten a clamp or fastener to keep the conductor in place. Once again, I understand that many electricians do backstab outlets in order to keep labor costs down, but I also had to go behind many of these electricians within 2 or 3 years to find and correct the faulty backstab connection. I often wonder how these electricians explain to the homeowner why they experience issues after they paid a professional to do the job. Anyway, thanks again for what you do to advance all skilled craftsmen and women. Sincerely, Rick, Master Electrician, Palmer, Nebraska. Wow, that was super helpful. So Rick's going to be on Pro Talk, which I'm delighted to talk to a real electrician. Do you guys have any questions think about questions, all of you listening, for Rick, and pass those along?
So yeah, I think that one of the things he talks about in there is meeting with homeowners and discussing the electrical system with them. And even on our jobs at TDS, we always have an electrical walkthrough where the homeowner gets to talk to our lead carpenter and the electrician and plan out what their needs are. And it's really important, as he said in the email, to get that right the first time.
Do you think it's typical, Ian, that folks want to have a say where their receptacles are and light switches? I mean, are folks savvy enough to be able to envision how they're going to furnish their home and where they need outlets to be?
I think a lot of the people spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on projects are that savvy and have pretty set needs of what they're looking for.
And are you seeing, fancy control systems for lighting and what have you more and more?
Yep. And even at my house, I did all the switches are all the Lutron Cassetta ones. So I have the bridge controller hooked up to my internet system so that I can control it all from a phone app, turn all the lights on and off, have set scenes that I can turn on of the different lights in different rooms at different dimmer levels.
Do you use any of that stuff?
Use it all the time. I love it.
Really?
Yeah.
So is that like power line controlled, or do you have to run low voltage cables to every electrical box too?
It's all Wi-Fi.
Oh, wow.
They're all
Amazing.
Wi-Fi connected switches. And it
So you
really
don't-
wasn't that much of an upcharge over a regular switch
One
at
of
scale anyway.
one of my electrical questions is sort of around panel sizing, and I've got a 100 amp panel right now, that's pretty full, and I've got a garage full of big tools, and I've got a plasma cutter and that I want to hook up, and I'm curious, is 200 amp kind of like the standard now? Is it like crazy to think about going beyond that if if it's just a home with like a detached workshop?
Well, I mean, my thoughts would be: do you have gas or oil heat? Because if you're trying to run electric appliances, water heaters, that kind of stuff, I think the load is much greater. If you're just wanting to run your table saw on the weekends, I don't know.
I mean, that's a great point, because so I've got a gravity furnace that's gas fed. It's just basically like a giant gas burner. I like to call it a glorified gas grill. And because it's such a simple machine, it's 50% efficient. And we also have a gas water heater, but the water heater, the previous homeowner taped the receipt to it, and it was purchased in like February of 2001. So like I feel like I'm living on borrowed time a little bit. But I'm looking at an electric hybrid water heater. If you look at the electric water heaters, it's like there's no way I could fit that into my current panel. And even with a hybrid, it's like I probably should upgrade my panel. But I'm curious, if I'm doing it, do I go to 200, or like, is there something beyond that's not crazy for a homeowner?
Well, I will ask Rick. I would say that 200 amps is going to be fine if you have gas appliances to heat your water in the house, though. But what do I know? I was also in the camp that said 15 amp outlets were fine, so Rick might disagree about this too. This comes from Chris in Chicago. Dear FHB crew, great discussion at the end of episode 420 on material costs and the state of the industry. Here in Chicago, the remodeling and construction boom continues. I have not noticed much of a shortage of materials in stock at the big box. I do know ordering things is another story. It seems it's dependent on what you are looking for. HVAC and electrical components fall into this hard-to-get category. As far as labor is concerned, here in the metro area, we still have a strong union presence in most commercial work, so there isn't much of a labor problem because of the much higher pay compared to non-union. We also seem to have a large pool of non-native born workers in residential construction that I know does not exist outside the major metro areas. When I travel to Wisconsin to see my folks, it's completely different. There are help wanted signs everywhere. Talking to the locals confirms that any kind of skilled tradesman up there is hard to find. Well, I'm sure that's true. It seems like it's everywhere. Is that true in your experience, Ian?
Yeah, it's very true. And I think one of the things that Wisconsin has, and maybe Andrew sees this in Minnesota as well, is the city areas. Like in Wisconsin, you have Madison and Milwaukee and the Fox cities, but then you also have this kind of area between the Milwaukee Madison corridor and Chicagoland, where there's just immense wealth and ability to do large scale, really expensive projects that all the best tradespeople all gravitate toward. That's the market where they're going to make the absolute most amount of money in this area. And for me, if I was a one guy in a truck, I could work down there. It'd be an hour and a half drive, and I could probably triple what I would get paid locally. So that's, I think, a bigger problem, is it's taking all the trade people and condensing them into a couple of small areas.
And what do you think happens to the folks who are left in the smaller towns with less money? I mean, like, who's working on their stuff?
Themselves.
Yeah.
A lot of times.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something I ran into. Even if I could find somebody, to work on my house, it would sort of be like nights or weekends. They're doing it as a side job, and like, unless you have a big enough project to warrant, multiple days or weeks at a premium price point, even in the Twin City, especially in the Twin Cities, it's very hard to find a person to do something for you within a reasonable amount of time.
I don't see things getting better. I mean, like, I keep hearing that we're just not attracting people to the industry, and I don't know what to do about it.
Certainly not in a way that matches the need. I think we're experiencing a time period where the need is pretty extreme, and people have a lot of disposable income to put toward their homes, and there isn't the people out there to do the work right now.
Ian, do you think people in doing trade work are making a killing now? I mean, have their wages gone up with the demand?
Not exactly from what I've seen. I think certain areas have seen some significant increases, especially in the mechanical trades. I think we talked about it in that episode that our mechanical contractors are paying pretty exorbitant, to them anyway, exorbitant hourly wages. But I think for the basement trade stuff, painters, carpenters, masons, I don't think I've seen much increase across the board in those wages.
I mean, it used to be that people were discouraged or not interested in trade work owing to the fact that you can make more money as a professional, right? Or, in other areas of work. But I think you can make a pretty good living as a skilled tradesperson now, but maybe not.
Yeah, I think a lot of the independent people are doing well, especially the ones who have some business savvy or some skill in operating the business besides the work they do with their hands.
I can tell you I have a couple service plumbers in the neighborhood, and one of them must have spent 6 figures on a in-ground backyard swimming pool with associated natural stone landscaping and water features, and I don't see anyone else doing that in the neighborhood.
I do think we're at a very interesting time because we're sort of like feeling the effects of the last recession in places, going out of business, and the generation that's really driving a lot of the trade, or has historically really driven the trades, is retiring, and there's this huge demand. My girlfriend's brother actually just I think he's 21. And he just started at an HVAC contractor after having worked, a variety of different part-time sales jobs. And he didn't seem like the kind of person who would have the aptitude to want to do that. But he was like, I get to, use some cool tools. There's some cool technology, and the pay is like fantastic,
And benefits.
And
you don't get benefits at a part-time sales gig, right?
Right, yeah. And I was like super stoked to hear that, but he's the first person under mid-30s that I've heard talk about anything related to the trades, just sort of like organically in conversation.
So are they training him? I'm guessing they are, because
yeah. He said we saw him at Christmas, and he mentioned that he's starting as sort of like a sales guy, like going on calls with somebody to be like, oh, like this is what we think you need to do, and here's your estimate. But he's getting time in the warehouse, putting together units, and then also being trained in how to be an HVAC technician.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I don't know that there are too many jobs, outside the trades that will train you and pay you well and give you benefits while you're learning. That's awesome.
I think another thing to add to this, Patrick, is a lot of people of my generation are trying to leave the field, like I did going into estimating and project management, that have worked with that generation ahead of us and seen what, working outside and working in the trades until you're 65 or 68 does to you. And, I speak for myself. It's certainly spooked me seeing the condition it puts you in after that amount of time. And it was what got me into looking at other options within the construction industry.
Do you ever miss the hands-on, Ian, and 9 to 5?
I do, especially now that the house is mostly done or done enough to where I don't have that thing to work on. But we'll see. I think this year will be an interesting one for me to see if I can come up with enough projects and things to keep me busy and interested around the house. And we have a lot of stuff to do around here yet, so I think I'll be able to scratch that itch.
I think it is definitely part of what attracts people to the craft, right? Is the making things, the problem solving, the satisfaction of building stuff. It's amazing. We heard from Rich. He has a comment and then a question. Hi, FHB podcast crew. Episode 419 discussed DTRA over OSB. DTRA, if y'all don't know, is a tile underlayment, and it's a uncoupling, decoupling membrane that's meant to isolate your tile from the substrate so it doesn't crack or come off. The DTRA installation instructions state that DTRA may be installed over any even and structurally sound OSB in a wet area if properly installed. It provides both an uncoupling and moisture barrier, and so the OSB is protected. A choice to not install over OSB can be taken out, but there is no conflict with the TCNA as claimed by one of the FHB hosts. I think that was me. What I said is that the TCNA doesn't have an assembly that is tested with OSB, but that might have changed. The question hit home for me because my wife and I remodeled a second floor bathroom and were relieved to find the OSB subfloor in excellent shape. We were fortunate the previous tile was thin set onto cement board and the later was screwed into the OSB subfloor. An impact driver was with the appropriate bit, cleanly removed all the fasteners. We focused on installing the DTRA properly and sealing the seams and baseboard with Curdy band. Okay, so you can definitely put tile over OSB with the right assembly. So
did it
thanks.
At my house with the Schluter system stuff, the DTRA and Curdy band. It's right in their tested assemblies book. I don't know much about the TCNA, but when I worked with the guys from Schluter here at our house, here's the Bible of how you install their product, and they've got to cut away.
Had you done it before, Ian?
Never done it. I had
What'd
really
you think?
Done almost no tile before I did the tile in my house. I thought it made it really easy. I really liked the DTRA as far as decoupling underlayment goes. I thought it was really easy to install and really easy to lay tile over.
And it allowed you to put the in-floor heat, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So Rich's question is, I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where stucco is the dominant exterior layer. We get 10 inches or less of rain per year, and a sunny climate helps mitigate many of stucco's problems. Several years ago, I replaced an external door off my family room with a window. See the attached photo. Unfortunately, the contractor did not install an appropriate water barrier below the window to make up for the lack of a stem wall. And so when the rain falls upon the window, a bit of water enters my home at the slab, enough to damage the carpet tacking and dirty the pad. I'd like to replace the carpet with a wood floor, and what are my options to fix this problem? I'm considering removing the stucco, sheathing beneath the window, and installing something in place of the missing stem wall. What do I use? The outdoor portion of the home by the window would be a nice place for an overhang, providing shade cover for the family room and adjacent kitchen. Install a small section of tile over DTRA, of course, by the window so the wood floor is protected from wind-driven rain. A good quality vapor barrier I can roll under the drywall or reduce water damaging the wood floor. Okay, so I can do the last two fixes easy. Would probably contract the first two. Thanks for the entertaining and informative podcast. I've learned a lot. Okay, so the last two is we're not fixing the problem. We're just like diverting the water. That seems like a non-starter for me. What do you guys think?
The one question I would have for you is, do you think whoever put that window in really didn't frame underneath it and sheathe underneath it?
I don't know. How could you fix the other things, right?
Right.
Yeah.
No, to me, the first thing that stuck out was the stoop and slab from where the door used to be. Right.
Do you want to describe that, Ian, to folks who are listening?
So this window used to be a door, and the door had a concrete sidewalk slab with a little stoop, which is now in front of the stucco and probably keeping water from being able to drain away. And I think it likely kept the person that did the work from being able to properly flash the bottom of the wall. So I would suggest cutting that slab away, and he's got decorative gravel around the whole house. continue that decorative gravel in the same pattern that it is around where that piece of concrete walk and stoop is.
The
And then
stoop looks
try and-
wacky. Like, it's
Yeah.
confusing, you know? Like, I would try and go to that window and knock on it to get lit in the house.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you got to pull that away, that cladding, and reflash this window. It's not done correctly. What do you think, Jeff? Did you see this photo? Did I send this to you?
I have not seen the photo, so no. But yeah, I'm based on Ian's description, it sounds like
It's weird, right?
yeah.
Well, it's like that whole thing of, you know, when you're remodeling something, like how far back do you go? And it, you know, and it's an example of you didn't go far back enough and now you've got problems and you've got to do it again anyway.
My thought was that when he was talking about a stem wall is that maybe this is a masonry CMU house, and most of the house is, you know, block, but they filled in this below the window with framing instead of masonry, but that's a guess.
Yeah, that could be too, but I still think by the look of that stoop, you know, I just looking at it and thinking back to what it had to have looked like with a door there, I'm not sure how I would go about properly flashing the what would be the new sill plate for that little stem wall under the window with that stoop there.
You know, this is done wrong every day. It's less common to get it right, I would say. Our next question comes from Barbara. No, not that Barbara. Hello, Patrick and crew. I'm listening to Mark talking about trusses being installed on his new home, and I thought this might be a good time to ask something that's been bugging me about truss design. My 1959 home has a 412 hip roof. I want to completely tear it off and replace it with a half-story second floor using attic trusses to have some living space up there. The current roof would have to be torn off in order to get accurate measurements, but I assume the supporting exterior walls are not exactly parallel to each other, leading to measurements that vary within an inch or two of each other. I could also get rough measurements without tearing off the current roof by crawling around the shallow attic and taking measurements as best I can. That way the current roof can stay on until the trusses are ready to be delivered. But somehow this seems foolish. How does the truss manufacturer handle a situation like mine, where a range of measurements are given? I realize they will make all the trusses the same length, but given a range of measurements, what length do they go with? I mean, can the trusses be made 2 inches too long and then cut back as needed during installation? Or maybe I'm looking at this all wrong. Maybe they make them at the shorter end of the range, and then any gaps between the rim board and each truss are filled during installation of the rim boards. I'd like to know the best way to proceed. This confusing situation has got to be explained to me so I can get on with the project. Okay. I don't know. Who wants to go first?
I think
You
she
were
needs
excited.
a
You
big-
were all excited about this, Ian.
Yeah, I think she needs a big greedy dormer, right? Instead of this second floor. But
So
we
attic
act-
trusses are not meant to have a lot of load. I'm sure you can make them however you want, but it's meant to be
Right.
light storage, not living space, I think is a starting point.
Right, yeah, that's a starting point. But I think a good truss manufacturer would be able to design a beefier bottom cord. We did a garage with attic trusses, and I think we had 2x8 bottom cords, and that gave us enough to plywood it and for them to have storage up there. But I think that, for one, she's got the right idea that all of this stuff needs to be built before that roof gets ripped off. At TDS, we actually do these types of projects pretty regularly with the small bungalow and Cape style houses in Madison. But one of the things that I wanted to point out to Barbara is she should be able to get those measurements from inside the house. Because if you know what your wall assembly is, all you have to do is measure across your house and add up all the measurements. And you'll get something close enough for truss manufacturers, because there is a fair amount of slop in those. If you think about, if you have 2x4 walls, you've got your bearing on each side, and if you're a little short or a little long, it all ends up getting made up inside the soffit when you cut the tails of the truss. So I don't think she should worry too much about that part of the project.
I think. What do you think about measuring from the attic, where you actually see the framing that the trusses are going to bear on?
Yeah, I think that's not that difficult to do. What I would do is position yourself in the middle of the attic and then pull a tape from each side, as opposed to trying to measure all the way across.
Inevitably, something's going to be in your way, right? You're just
just set yourself up in the middle and pull from one side, make a mark on that, rafter tie or ceiling joist, and pull from the other side and measure to that mark. You could do that. Would get you a pretty reasonable measurement. But I would be surprised if her house is as far out of whack as she thinks it is.
I wouldn't. I've worked on some junky old houses, believe me. So I had this situation in my out-of-level project in my house in Stowe, and I had the trusses made a couple inches bigger, and I hid the discrepancy in the porch ceiling, right? So the trusses overhung a little bit, and then the porch ceiling continued that plane, and then I was able to hide what amounted to, I don't know, it was like 2 inches overhang on one end of the building and like an inch. So my house was an inch out of square over 28 feet, I think it was. And, there's ways to hide this. And your truss manufacturer, they're used to doing this. They know what to do. So, they're the experts in this. If you're working with a contractor, make sure they get paired up with a good component manufacturer, and they'll know how to do this.
You can even go out and source your components first. I don't know where Barbara is, but just in southeastern Wisconsin, there's maybe 5 or 6 different places you can go to source components. And a lot of the bigger lumber yards will have a designer or an engineer that can really help you with this.
I like the truss solution when you're adding a level with a pony wall or an eave wall, because when you use conventional rafters, you need to have a structural ridge in these applications, because the pony wall has a tendency to push out at the top, and the structure is deficient that way. So trusses are a great way to solve that problem, because they don't have the spreading problem that rafters do.
Yeah, I wonder what she's going to use this space for, if she's going to need some dormers on the eave sides of the house to get more light in. Because if you just did regular attic dormers, you're only going to end up with windows in what
on
would
the
be
gables.
the new gables.
Yeah. So I did a cross gable on my house, and truss companies can make those too. It's pretty cool, the stuff they can do, and it sure saves a lot of time when the roof is missing from your house. This comes from Becki. Hello, podcast. I discovered your podcast, and I am hooked. Awesome job, everyone. I'm not a builder, but hope to build a few houses as a real estate investor. The first project I want to build is more of a family project than an investment. It's an AFrame cabin about 18 foot wide and 32 feet long on a lot just steps away from the beach on the Oregon coast. I've emailed 8 recommended builders about it and haven't heard back yet. My main goal for this build is to learn how to work with a builder and also keep the house on a low budget so I can share it with family as a beach house instead of using it as a rental. What tips can you give me to keep down costs? I hear slab foundations are less expensive, but I believe my lot would be better suited to pier and beam. Would a pier and beam foundation cost a lot more? I'm sticking to a simple A-frame roof with no side pop-out wings. I'd like the roof to be metal with a full window wall in the front. I'd need a few skylight type windows as well. I'm willing to do some work, but I get the impression that builders might not want the owner on their build site. Is this true? Yes.
Emphatically.
If so, is that mainly due with insurance? Is there a way I could get on their insurance? Another question, do you think builders might be hesitant to work on a small A-frame like this? I'd love to hear all your thoughts. Thanks so much, Becki. Well, Becki, if the thing is really rural, as you suggest, that's a problem, right? Folks are not going to want to travel a long way to work on a little project. So that might be part of the consideration. Who wants to go next?
So I did a deep dive on A-frames just from like a curiosity standpoint. They're having a moment right now.
For this question, Andrew, or previously?
Previously. So actually, this triangle box here is a set of A-frame plans.
Of course it is.
And it's shaped like an A-frame. And it's very much like a like the A-frame building, it seems like a lot of people built them in the 60s and 70s themselves in these rural locations.
They smoked a lot of weed at that point too in
Yeah,
life.
and it seems like a very like DIY friendly way to build a structure. And so it's probably like a like we were just talking about how it's hard to get folks to work on inexpensive jobs. And but like I don't know, like, could she just find a bunch of hippies in Oregon to help her, you know?
There, if not there, where?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, you know, the combination of the size of the project and, you know, the rural nature, and also when you say low budget to any professional, you know, instantly, you know, there are ways to do things affordably and efficiently, but it's still going to cost much more than a lot of people feel like it should.
Yeah, those are alarm bells, right?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
Yeah, in terms of her wanting to work on it and whether it's insurance related that it wouldn't be allowed, I would put out there that most builders are operating on really minuscule margins, like, you know, 4 to 8% net profit. I think if you hit 8%, you're really killing it as a builder, net profit wise. So anything that deviates from your standard normal procedures, like having a homeowner working with you or doing part of the job, is just going to be a no-go. It's too risky. There's just not the meat on a job to take any loss or lost time there.
How about slab versus pier and beam?
The one thing that I would caution her on is you got to think ahead to what you want your finished floor to be like. If you're cool with just a concrete slab for your finished floor everywhere, then that slab foundation is, even with some extra excavating work, is going to be so much less expensive than doing a pier and beam plus a floor system over it. But if you want to have a variety of finished floors inside this cabin, then you're probably going to be better off going with that pier and beam so that you can actually install those floors efficiently.
What I don't know about the Oregon coast is everything, but the pictures I've seen and the places I've been there, it's very, very hilly, right? The land drops right off into the Pacific. So, you know, there are some limitations on where you can put a slab, but if it's flat enough, I'd say that's the way to go.
I would think with the small size of what she wants to build, a good excavator ought to be able to carve a flat spot out of some rolling space for that small of a build.
Andrew, I want to ask you, what is your interest with A-frame houses? What is this about?
You know, it, like, I love the DIY nature of it, and like for whatever reason, like, there seem to be a bunch of them in northern Wisconsin. I grew up in central Wisconsin. My best friend in grade school, his family had one on the O plane flowage, and I just like the details, and like how they're built is like fascinating, because they turn into these big structures, but they're very straightforward to build. And you know, I have designs on getting some land up north somewhere and building a couple of small buildings and getting off the grid and all that kind of stuff. The same reason why people built A-frames 50 years ago, you know?
How the heck do you furnish it, though? I mean, like, I don't know.
Well, that's the beautiful thing. You find this piece of land, you build your A-frame, you get your sawmill, you cut down some trees. You know,
and then you make all your furniture with like sloping backs to fit against the wall, right?
Yeah. Well, and it, you know, and like this, especially if you get a second story, like there's like a coziness to it, you know, that it's really, there's just room for a bed and like a nightstand. But it, you know, it's about getting rid of all these books and A-frame plans and just living simply, you know?
I've never lived in one. I'd like to hear Mike Gurton's thoughts on this subject and Becki's build, because his dad built one, and I believe his mom still lives in it.
The other thing I would point out for her wanting to do it inexpensively is the metal roof, which I understand is going to look pretty killer on an A-frame. Those are like 4x the cost of an asphalt roof. And it's not going to last very long on the Oregon coast, because I'm sure you get a you get
Salt
a bit of
spray.
salt water spray there. So that might be an unnecessary expense on the project.
I can't imagine shingling one of these things, though. Oh my goodness, that's going to be a huge undertaking.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But you're
but
not
you
doing
don't have
siding
siding.
then.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot
Well,
of the ones I've seen are asphalt shingled, or
Yeah.
they have the Matt Milham special agricultural metal panel just face screwed right onto them.
Northern New England ski chalets are very much in that style oftentimes, right? And they were probably
Yeah.
built in the 70s when you guys are pointed out when these were in their heyday. I think it's cool. I think you just got to build this thing yourself, Becki. Get some friends and have at it. It, like everyone says, they're not complicated.
She could always try and take a position of general contracting it herself and just try and find somebody that does framing to get it framed up and sheathed, and find a roofer. You're only going to need a roofer, right? You don't need a siding guy. So, you could look at it from that perspective and get yourself a white box and do all the finishes yourself would be another option. Because if she's thinking about getting into property development already, she's going to have to get super creative to be able to make good money on doing something like that.
And in this, business model she's proposing, like your subs are everything, right? So you might as well start building those relationships right away. This comes from Justin on Long Island. Hi, FHB. First of all, I wanted to thank you for creating this podcast. My wife and I are building our first home, and we learned a ton over the last year as we've worked through our design process. It's truly been an incredible resource, even for lay people like us. I've been thinking a lot about the soundproofing options for our place, so the last episode was well timed. I'd certainly be curious on a follow-up to that segment with some other options out there. For example, I'm considering Quiet Rock products for some rooms, as well as options involving green glue soundproofing materials. So, Justin, thanks for pointing out that our previous conversation didn't mention any of these things, which work similar to some of the methods we talked about. But I don't know, who wants to get in on this conversation?
So in a previous life, I worked in some recording studios and had to build isolated rooms inside these recording studios. And
I learn interesting things about you every time we talk, Andrew. It is amazing.
well, and so you can see my former recording studio monitors are behind me. They're the like kind of thing that are like just expensive enough that like you don't want to sell them for what they're worth now, but they're overkill for listening to my Beatles outtakes that I've been into. But really, like the things that stop sound are mass and airspace. And, when you look at Quiet Rock, it's really, you can get like the same sound transmission levels if you just use 2 sheets of drywall, and it's probably half the price of a sheet of Quiet Rock. Green glue is like another really cool thing that like, if you're not trying, like, if you're trying...
Before you go
Yeah.
on, do you want to explain to folks what that is?
So green glue is it comes in a tube, and you there's like a certain pattern you're supposed to apply it on your sheets, and depending on how much green glue you put on, it decouples one sheet from the next sheet, and really that decoupling, I think theoretically it adds like a little bit of an air gap, but it basically stops the wall or like dampens the wall from shaking, and that like. That's how sound travels through stuff, is it vibrates the object and then moves on to the next one. But if you're not trying to like keep a drum set and like a huge guitar amp from like bothering your neighbors, green glue may be overkill, but it's like an inexpensive thing you can do when you're building your room to like, it's like almost insurance that it'll perform better. The like, again, the most expensive part about building anything is rebuilding it if you messed it up the first time.
Sure.
There are also, I think it's called maybe like resilient channel. So it's a product that you hang your drywall on that decouples it from the wall. And then, just think about, there's like the alternating stud wall design too. If you have like a 2x6 plate, but 2x4 is alternating on each side, that also helps decouple the wall a little bit. But then the other part of it is really like sound travels through air the most efficiently, other than I think water. It also travels through pretty efficiently. So making sure all of your air gaps are sealed, especially, around your outlets, very similar to what you do if you were air sealing, a house.
The same
Are the
mechanisms,
big
right?
things.
It's air moving through spaces that it's not supposed to.
Yeah.
If you can
Yeah.
control that, it's going to be quieter.
Yeah, and then insulation, unfaced insulation in interior walls also seems to be helpful. And then the last part of it is your HVAC, air handling systems, isolating those in a way like that's also a way where air moves through spaces. And so like that design can get a little complicated. There's a very good book written by a guy named Rod Gervais I think it's called like Home Recording Studio Build It Like the Pros, but it has all of these construction details and all of these wall assemblies in it that were super helpful when I was just like, okay, we've got a cheap space and we want to make a bunch of noise. How do we not get the cops called?
Did that work?
It did work, no police run-ins as a result of recording loud music. Yeah.
That's cool. And we mentioned a couple of those things in the previous conversation, but we learned some new stuff. What was the name of the book again? And I'll put that in the podcast notes.
It's Home Recording Studio Build It Like the Pros. I'll send you the link.
Cool. Well, that's super helpful. It's a good question. And I'm guessing Justin has concerns with this noise because of where he lives. Long Island can be noisy, and we all want our homes to be sanctuaries now, especially. So quiet is part of that. Is your house quiet enough, Jeff?
It's pretty quiet. I mean, despite the fact I live near a gun range.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a skeet range not too far away.
Do you ever tempted to go over there and shoot some skeet?
I would like to try it sometime, but
Oh, it's super fun. Have you guys ever done that?
I've never done it. When we
that's
lived
cool.
in Millbrook, we were near the Orvis shooting ground. So all weekend long, 10 months out of the year, it was just constant.
Well, and Jeff would agree, shotguns are loud, right? They're really loud. Well, folks, I got one more thing here. This comes from Marty. On December 31st podcast, toward the beginning, Ian made reference to builders he follows on Instagram. Do you mind sharing which ones they are? He made reference to the fact that we all look at the same ones. Thanks in advance. So do you want to share, Ian, who you're looking at?
Yeah, I wrote down a couple of them here. I think my comment of we all look at the same ones is, probably more toward like your classic, the people that have big internet presence like Steve Basic and Matt Reisinger and guys like that. But some ones that are a little bit more off the beaten path that I would suggest people follow would be, of course, Ben Bogey. If you're not following him, I think you gotta follow him. But one that I really like following is this guy named Benjamin Morton. I think his Instagram thing is morton.ben, but I would make the controversial statement that he's the most talented framer on Instagram.
Wow. You're nodding
couple-
like you know this guy, Andrew. Have you heard of this builder?
I follow him on Instagram,
Do you? Cool.
I'd also throw in there awesome framers. It's not always like super helpful how-to content, but it's
Fun.
It's fun. It makes you laugh.
Yeah.
And
That's
then-
Tim Euler, and I
Yeah.
forget his sidekick's name. Forgive me. That'll come to me.
I want to say it's maybe Brian, or that might be his brother.
His brother is Brian.
not his sidekick.
Did you have anyone else on your list, Ian?
Yeah, I had a couple of like really good instructional ones. One is bigdogconstruction.gm. It's this guy named Aaron Jones. Just always doing teaching posts and explaining how to cut rafters and build complex things, and just really great content that way. Squared Away Contracting is another one that I follow. Who's got posts that are kind of a mix of cool projects and how to. And And then I had Trillium Architects, Elizabeth DeSalvo's architecture company. They're really on the cutting edge of the passive house stuff and are starting to do some modular passive house work, which is pretty cool to follow on there. Another one is Trill Hill Farm. It's a couple in northern Wisconsin who are building their own passive house and general contracting it themselves and doing a lot of the work. And it's been a pretty cool follow for me.
So did they have prior experience building, Ian, or is this a first time?
From what I can tell, it's the first time. They're winging it, but winging it in a really educated way is how it comes off a lot. And they're really showing a lot of the behind the scenes stuff like I tried to do with our build.
Are they getting it right?
I think so. I think that it looks like they're doing a really great job, and they've got a mix of local trade guys and family friends that are helping them. But they're going whole hog on the passive house. And then I had De Blasi Painting, who's a painting contractor that I used to work with a lot in the Northeast, and I think they did some work with you, Patrick, for the magazine.
Mike did a feature on how to remove wallpaper, and boy, I learned a lot. There's more to know to that subject than you might imagine to do it well.
Yeah, and his son Luke is doing a lot of the running of the business, and he puts on some great Instagram stories that go through what they're doing. And I think one of his recent ones was showing how they site protect a really fancy, expensive house to paint the interior and protect finishes. So those are some I follow. And another one that is a really good how-to is Drywall Shorty. It's this woman named Lydia out in Bozeman, Montana. And I'm pretty sure if you wanted to, you could teach yourself how to finish drywall just from following her.
Cool. I should look at that for sure.
Do you follow her too, Andrew? You're nodding like
I do. I did a kitchen remodel and I'm doing a little half bath, and like the drywall is the most frustrating part of it for me for whatever reason. But I've been following her for about the last year. And
have you found that helpful, Andrew?
I have found it. I've picked up a few things, but also it's like, just as like content in general, it's like that soothing thing that happens when you see like this smooth spread of something, and it's like, it's really an art form.
It's your ASMR feed, right?
Yeah.
Marty had one other question. Patrick, one more question. Any good camps in the summer for high schoolers to attend where they can learn a trade or work on construction similar to a high school class, as I heard on one of your podcasts? Wish you a fabulous 2022. The December 31st show was excellent, helpful, informative, at times fun. I don't know of good camps, but send your kids to Habitat for Humanity construction sites, and they will learn all this stuff and meet really cool people and be doing good work too. So that would be my suggestion. You guys have any thoughts otherwise?
I mean, there are a ton of summer camps out there, and there always seems to be like an opportunity to like buddy up with the caretaker of the land, and like you will learn a lot of stuff. It won't necessarily be all construction, but it's sort of like gets you hands-on in a way that most kids don't have the chance to if they live in a more urban area.
Another thing you can watch out for, and I don't know if this has gone away because of COVID, but a lot of larger communities will do days where you help people who are shut-ins or people who need help on their house or the elderly. And they just organize people to clean yards, fix fences, hang new
doors. Do
painting,
painting, all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Things like that would be a good one to watch out for.
I would tell Marty, if you want to send your kids over here, Marty, I'll put them to work and teach them some stuff.
I think you're opening Pandora's box by throwing that offer out there. You might want Jeff to edit that out.
Well, do you guys have anything you want to talk about before we go?
How's it going, Andrew, with starting this new gig?
It's fun. I feel like now I've got my regular check-in with Patrick because I just talk to him every week on the podcast. We don't get into the nitty-gritty of the business, but there's a lot of like cool people in this business, and a lot of I'm gearing up to go to IBS at the beginning of February. So if you see me there, I'll be one of the guys with a beard and a mask on walking around. Pretty easy to identify.
He'll stick out like a sore thumb, man.
Yeah. But it's a lot of fun. And I think, some of the things we talked on about, there's this gap in the trades, and there's this whole subsection of people who still need to maintain their homes that I think Fine Homebuilding is very well positioned to help solve or contribute, to solutions to both of those problems.
I want to say thanks to all the amazing listeners we have. I so appreciate your questions and feedback, especially. Someone's got to keep us on the right track, and you all are listening, and I appreciate it very much. And keep those questions coming. It's been good lately. And if we could get some design questions, that would be even better, because those seem to be less frequent. And it might be because of the mix of the show presently, but let's do some of that, because it's interesting. And like Andrew said earlier, doing things right the first time is way less expensive than having to do them a second time.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks to Ian, Andrew, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find the podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Happy building. And thank you very much for listening.